It all began when I moved into my new apartment in Portland. I'm Mia, 25 years old, trying to build a fresh start in this vibrant city. Independence has always been my thing. I love living alone, relishing the freedom and quiet. But last fall, my sense of security was shattered, and my perception of solitude took a dark turn. The first few months in my new place were uneventful. The apartment was small but cozy, nestled in a quiet neighborhood that seemed perfect for someone like me, who cherished peaceful late-night walks. I had a routine. Work all day, come home, relax, and then head out for a walk around 10 p.m. It was my way of decompressing after a long day. One evening, as I was returning from one of these walks, I felt a strange sensation, like someone was watching me. The streets were deserted, illuminated only by the occasional street lamp casting long shadows. I glanced around but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Shaking off the unease, I hurried home, telling myself it was just my imagination. The next morning, I noticed my front door was unlocked. I distinctly remembered locking it before I went to bed. I shrugged it off as a lapse in memory. But over the next few days, I kept finding small things out of place. My keys on the kitchen counter instead of the hook by the door. My favorite book lying open on the coffee table when I always left it on the shelf. These little oddities began to pile up, gnawing at my peace of mind. One night, after another unsettling walk, I found a note slipped under my door. It was a simple piece of paper with 2 words written in neat, almost delicate handwriting. Nice walk. My heart pounded as I stared at the note, trying to make sense of it. Was it a joke? A neighbor's idea of being friendly? But the familiarity of it felt wrong, too personal. I decided to confide in my friend Sarah, who lived nearby. Over a cup of coffee, I showed her the note and told her about the strange occurrences. She immediately looked concerned. "Mia, you need to take this seriously. Go to the police," she urged. I laughed it off, saying it was probably just a harmless prank. But Sarah was insistent, so to appease her, I agreed to install a security camera outside my front door. A few days went by without incident, and I began to relax, thinking maybe it was just a one-time thing. But then, the camera footage started to show something disturbing. In the middle of the night, a figure would appear at my door, standing there for several minutes before disappearing into the darkness. The person always wore a hooded jacket, making it impossible to see their face. I took the footage to the police, but without a clear image or any direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. They advised me to stay vigilant and keep the camera running. I installed additional cameras around my apartment, hoping it would deter whoever was doing this. Then things escalated. I began receiving texts from an unknown number. They were innocuous at first, simple greetings, questions about my day, but soon they became more invasive. "How did you sleep last night?" "I love that red dress you wore yesterday." The texts always came when I was alone, making me feel like I was constantly being watched. I blocked the number, but new ones kept appearing. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home, jumping at every noise and shadow. I stopped going on my nightly walks, and Sarah insisted on staying over several nights to keep me company. One night, we decided to review the camera footage together. As we watched, we saw the hooded figure again, but this time, they did something different. They approached one of the windows and appeared to press their face against the glass as if trying to peer inside. Sarah gasped, and I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. The next day, I took the footage back to the police. This time, they took it more seriously and agreed to patrol my neighborhood more frequently. Despite this, the texts and the feeling of being watched didn't stop. In fact, they grew more frequent and disturbing. Then came the night that changed everything. I was alone, trying to get some work done when I heard a noise coming from my bedroom. It was a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like fabric brushing against the floor. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and crept towards the noise. I pushed open the bedroom door and saw nothing at first, but then I noticed the closet door was slightly ajar. I mustered all my courage and yanked it open. There, Crouched among my clothes was the hooded figure. For a split second, we just stared at each other. Then, in a blur of motion, they pushed past me and bolted out of the apartment. I called the police immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. They arrived within minutes and searched the area but found no trace of the intruder. The realization that the stalker had been inside my home, hiding just feet away from where I slept, was horrifying. I couldn't stay in that apartment after that. With the help of Sarah and my family, I moved to a new place in a different part of the city. The texts stopped, and the unsettling incidents ceased, but the fear lingered. It's been a few months since then, and I'm still trying to rebuild my sense of security. I've installed top-of-the-line security systems, and I'm more cautious than ever. But every so often, when I'm alone at night, I still get that prickling feeling on the back of my neck, and I wonder if the stalker is out there, watching, waiting for another chance to invade my life. Hey Reddit. I'm a 27-year-old male from Miami, and I want to share a story about how my curiosity led me to one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. This happened a few months ago when I decided to explore the dark web. I've always been interested in tech and the hidden parts of the internet. I'd heard all sorts of stories about the dark web, places where you could find anything if you looked hard enough. One night, feeling particularly adventurous and a little bored, I decided to dive in and see what all the fuss was about. Setting up Tor was easy. I started by browsing through various forums and marketplaces, mostly coming across conspiracy theories, weird collections, and some illegal stuff I knew better than to click on. But then I found a link that really grabbed my attention. The deepest secrets revealed. It promised a live stream of exclusive content for a small fee in Bitcoin. I was intrigued, and against my better judgment, I decided to go for it. I transferred the Bitcoin, and soon enough I received a link to a private stream. The screen was black at first, with a countdown ticking away the seconds until the stream began. I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. I had no idea what to expect. When the countdown hit 0, the screen flickered to life, showing a dimly lit room. A man wearing a dark hood stood in the center, his face obscured by shadows. His voice, distorted and deep, filled my headphones. "Welcome," he said. "You're about to witness something truly unique." He moved aside, revealing a large, ornate mirror. The frame was intricate, almost Gothic in design. I leaned in closer, my curiosity piqued. The man began to speak in a language I didn't understand, chanting in a rhythmic, almost hypnotic manner. The air in my room grew colder, and I felt an uneasy chill run down my spine. Suddenly, the mirror's surface started to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. The reflection became distorted, and I could make out faint shapes moving within it. My heart pounded as I watched, unable to tear my eyes away. The chanting grew louder, more intense, and the shapes in the mirror became clearer. I saw faces, twisted, agonized faces, pressing against the glass as if trying to escape. The man in the hood raised his hands, and the room on the screen seemed to darken further, the shadows growing deeper and more menacing. A scream erupted from the speakers, a sound so piercing and filled with terror that I nearly ripped my headphones off. The faces in the mirror were now writhing, their mouths open in silent screams. The hooded man turned to the camera, his eyes glowing a sinister red. "Join us," he intoned, his voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. Without thinking, I slammed my laptop shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My room felt stifling, the air thick with an oppressive weight. I told myself it was just a sick prank, a twisted show meant to scare thrill-seekers like me. But then things started happening. My phone would ring at odd hours, but there was never anyone on the other end. Objects in my apartment would be in different places from where I left them. I'd wake up in the middle of the night feeling like someone was watching me, only to find my room empty. One night, as I was trying to sleep, I heard whispering, faint, indistinguishable voices coming from the direction of my laptop. Gathering my courage, I opened it, half expecting to see that horrific stream again. but the screen was blank except for a single message. You shouldn't have left. Terrified, I unplugged my laptop and shoved it into a closet. But the feeling of being watched never left me. I started seeing fleeting shadows out of the corner of my eye, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I'd hear that same piercing scream from my headphones echoing in my mind. Desperate, I reached out to some online forums hoping someone could help me. Most people dismissed my story as a hallucination or a bad dream. But one user, under the name Watcher23, sent me a private message. He told me that I had stumbled upon something real, something dangerous, and that the only way to stop it was to destroy anything connected to that stream. Taking his advice, I smashed my laptop, my phone, and even my router, anything that had touched that cursed link. It took a few weeks, but the feeling of being watched gradually faded. The strange occurrences stopped, and I finally started to feel like myself again. I've stayed away from the dark web since then. The experience left me shaken, and I still get chills thinking about those faces in the mirror, the hooded man, and his haunting chant. Some doors should never be opened, and some secrets are best left buried in the shadows. You ever had one of those weekends where you just need to get away from everything? That was me, about 3 months ago. I'm Alex, 29, and I had just wrapped up a brutal project at work. My mind was fried, and I needed some peace. So, I decided to go camping, alone. I packed my gear, left a note for my roommate, and drove out to my favorite spot, a secluded area in the state forest, miles away from the nearest town. The place was perfect. No cell service, no noise, just me and nature. I pitched my tent by a small clearing near a stream, set up a campfire, and settled in for a weekend of relaxation. The first day was bliss. I hiked, fished, and enjoyed the tranquility. As evening fell, I cooked dinner over the fire and watched the stars come out. It was exactly what I needed. I felt the stress melting away as I listened to the sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the crackle of the fire. But then around midnight I heard something that didn't belong. At first it was faint, a rhythmic chanting carried on the wind. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the wind playing tricks on me. But the sound grew louder, more distinct. It was chanting, no doubt about it. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my flashlight and headed in the direction of the sound. As I moved through the trees, the chanting became clearer. It was an eerie, monotonous drone, almost hypnotic. I moved cautiously, not wanting to make my presence known. The last thing I needed was to stumble into some weird forest ritual. After about 10 minutes, I reached the edge of another clearing. What I saw made my blood run cold. About a dozen people dressed in long, dark robes stood in a circle around a large, flat stone. Candles flickered in a ring around them, casting long, dancing shadows. In the center of the stone lay a small animal, a rabbit, I think, its lifeless body illuminated by the candlelight. The leader, a tall figure with a hood that obscured their face, raised their hands and continued chanting. The others joined in, their voices melding into a haunting chorus. I watched in morbid fascination, unable to move or look away. My mind raced with questions. Who were these people? What were they doing here? My flashlight slipped from my hand and hit the ground with a dull thud. The chanting stopped abruptly. Every robed figure turned to face me, their hoods hiding their faces, but not their intent. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest as the leader stepped forward. "Who's there?" the leader demanded, their voice sharp and commanding. I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush, not caring about the noise I was making. Branches whipped against my face and my lungs burned, but I didn't stop. I could hear footsteps behind me gaining quickly. My mind was a blur of fear and adrenaline. I had no idea where I was going. I just needed to get away. The forest, which had seemed so peaceful, now felt like a maze of shadows and dangers. I stumbled and fell, scraping my knees and hands. but I forced myself up and kept running. After what felt like an eternity, I burst into my campsite. I grabbed my car keys and didn't even bother packing up my gear. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and sped down the narrow dirt road, the headlights cutting through the darkness. I didn't look back until I was miles away, and even then, I half expected to see robed figures in my rearview mirror. I drove straight home, heart pounding and mind racing. I didn't stop until I was safely inside my apartment. My roommate looked at me like I was crazy when I burst through the door, but I didn't care. I was safe. I never went back to that spot. In fact, I haven't been camping since. The woods, which once brought me peace, now only remind me of that night. I still think about it sometimes late at night, wondering who those people were and what they were doing. I'm not sure I want to know. All I know is that I was lucky to get away, and I'll never take the tranquility of nature for granted again. My name is Jake, and I want to tell you about the time I got more than I bargained for at what I thought was just a fun night with friends. I'm 26, live in Boston, and my story begins with a Halloween party last year. My friends and I were always on the lookout for new and exciting ways to celebrate Halloween. We'd done the haunted houses, the ghost tours, even the cheesy horror movie marathons. This time, someone suggested something different, a seance. It sounded like harmless fun, a way to spook ourselves in the comfort of my friend Lisa's apartment. Lisa was into all things mystical and occult. Her apartment was filled with candles, crystals, and books on witchcraft. She'd even bought a Ouija board from a thrift store, convinced it was an authentic antique. The night of the party, we all gathered in her dimly lit living room. The flickering candlelight and the faint scent of incense set the mood perfectly. There were 6 of us in total. Lisa, her boyfriend Mark, my girlfriend Emily, and 2 other friends, Mike and Sarah. Lisa explained that she had found an old ritual in one of her books, something that promised to open a doorway to the other side. She insisted it was just for fun, a way to get some cheap thrills. We all agreed, not taking it too seriously. We formed a circle, each of us holding hands, with the Ouija board placed in the center. Lisa began to recite the incantation from the book. Her voice was steady, almost melodic, as she spoke the ancient words. The air seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper. I felt a slight unease, but I pushed it aside, telling myself it was just the atmosphere we had created. As Lisa finished the chant, we all waited in silence, expecting nothing more than a creepy, awkward moment. But then, the planchette on the Ouija board started to move. At first, we thought it was Lisa pushing it, but her fingers barely touched the board. The planchette spelled out a single word: welcome. We all laughed nervously, accusing each other of moving the planchette. But before we could discuss it further, the candles flickered violently, and a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the flames. We sat in darkness, the only light coming from the street outside. The air was thick with tension, and I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then a low, guttural voice echoed through the room. "Who dares summon me?" We all froze. It wasn't Lisa or anyone else trying to scare us. This voice was real, and it sent a chill down my spine. I felt a sudden, intense pressure on my chest, as if something was trying to push me down. Emily screamed, and I could hear the others gasping in fear. Lisa fumbled to relight the candles, her hands shaking. When the flames finally flickered back to life, we saw it. A shadowy figure stood in the corner of the room, its form barely distinguishable in the dim light. It had no discernible features, just a dark, menacing presence. "We need to end this," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. She grabbed the book and flipped through the pages frantically, searching for a way to close the doorway she had opened. The figure began to move toward us, its shadowy form growing larger and more defined. The temperature in the room plummeted, and a sense of dread washed over me. Lisa found the page she was looking for and began to chant again, but the words seemed to have no effect. The entity was almost upon us when Mark, acting on instinct, kicked over the Ouija board, breaking our circle. The figure halted, its attention shifting to the scattered pieces of the board. It let out a roar of anger, a sound that seemed to shake the very walls of the apartment. Taking advantage of the distraction, we all scrambled to our feet and ran for the door. We spilled out into the hallway, gasping for breath, the sense of terror still gripping us. Lisa slammed the door shut behind us, and for a moment we just stood there, too stunned to speak. Eventually, we found the courage to re-enter the apartment. The shadowy figure was gone, but the sense of unease lingered. The candles were out again, and the Ouija board lay in pieces on the floor. Lisa insisted that we perform a cleansing ritual to ensure the entity was truly gone. We all agreed, not wanting to take any chances. We gathered salt, sage, and other items Lisa deemed necessary, and performed the ritual under her guidance. The atmosphere gradually lightened, and the oppressive feeling began to lift. But the memory of that night stayed with us, a constant reminder of the danger we had unknowingly invited into our lives. I haven't participated in anything remotely occult since that night. We all agreed to keep the experience to ourselves, not wanting to be labeled as crazy. But every so often, I find myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see that shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. It's a reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. I've always been a skeptic. Aliens, UFOs, all that stuff. I never believed a word of it. But what happened to me one summer night changed that forever. My name is Tom, and this is my story. I was driving back home from a friend's cabin deep in the mountains. It was late, around midnight, and the road was empty, the kind of emptiness that can make you feel completely alone in the world. The only light came from my headlights cutting through the thick darkness. The drive was supposed to be uneventful. Just a couple of hours through winding roads and dense forest. I enjoyed these solitary drives, the quiet giving me time to think. But this night, the quiet was different. It was oppressive, almost suffocating. There was no sound, not even the rustle of leaves or the chirp of crickets, just the hum of my engine and the occasional crunch of gravel under my tires. About an hour into the drive, I noticed a strange light in the sky. At first, I thought it was just a plane, but it was too bright, and it didn't seem to move like a plane should. It hovered, then darted side to side, almost playfully. I frowned, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a drone. But out here, in the middle of nowhere, curiosity got the better of me. I pulled over to the side of the road, killed the engine, and stepped out of the car. The night air was cool, but I barely noticed. My eyes were glued to the light, which seemed to have grown brighter and larger. It was definitely not a drone. I watched as it hovered for a moment longer, then shot across the sky at an impossible speed, stopping abruptly and then zooming back to its original spot. My heart pounded in my chest. This was no aircraft I'd ever seen. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt a chill run down my spine. As I stood there staring up at the sky, the light started to descend. Slowly at first, then faster, coming closer and closer until it was just above the treetops. It was silent, eerily so. No hum of an engine, no whoosh of air, just a glowing orb of light hanging in the sky. Panic set in. I scrambled back into my car and locked the doors, as if that could protect me from whatever this was. The light hovered above the road, bathing everything in an otherworldly glow. I fumbled for my phone, but of course there was no signal. I was alone. The light began to move again, this time directly towards me. I felt like a rabbit caught in the headlights of an oncoming car. My mind raced with thoughts of all those UFO stories I'd laughed off. Now I wasn't laughing. Without thinking, I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life. I floored the gas pedal, tires screeching as I sped down the road. The light followed, keeping pace effortlessly. No matter how fast I went, it stayed right behind me, a relentless pursuer. Every twist and turn of the road, the light mirrored. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My eyes flicked between the road ahead and the rearview mirror where the light loomed like a specter. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, The light veered off to the side and vanished into the forest. I didn't slow down. Not until I reached the nearest town, where the comforting glow of streetlights and the presence of other people finally made me feel safe. I pulled into a gas station, my hands still trembling as I parked the car. I sat there for a moment, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I glanced up at the sky, half expecting to see the light again, but it was gone. Just stars and the pale glow of the moon. I went inside the gas station, the harsh fluorescent lights a stark contrast to the eerie glow of the UFO. The clerk looked up as I walked in, probably noticing how shaken I was. I wanted to tell him what had happened, to ask if he'd seen anything strange, but I couldn't find the words. What could I say? That I'd been chased by a light in the sky. I bought a cup of coffee and sat down at one of the tables, trying to calm my nerves. As I sipped the hot liquid, my mind kept replaying the encounter. I was a skeptic, a man of reason, but what I had seen defied all logic. I had no explanation, only fear. That night changed me. I still don't know what I saw, and maybe I never will. But I know one thing for certain. There are things out there that we don't understand. Things that can't be explained away with science or reason. And sometimes those things find us, even on quiet mountain roads in the dead of night.